The Colonial Parkway murders, the killings on Lover's Lane in the early 1980s. Along Virginia's scenic Colonial Parkway, a picturesque highway connecting Jamestown, Williamsburg, and Yorktown, an unspeakable horror unfolded. Over a span of 3 years, young couples in secluded areas were brutally murdered, leaving a trail of grief, fear, and unanswered questions. The Colonial Parkway murders were the serial murders of at least 10 people in the U.S. state of Virginia between 1986 and 1989. The killings were associated with the Colonial Parkway, a 22-mile-long thoroughfare that cuts through the Colonial National Historical Park and connects Jamestown, Williamsburg, and Yorktown. The first 2 victims were discovered dead inside a vehicle found on the parkway, as was an abandoned vehicle belonging to another couple who were missing and presumed dead. Long stretches of the Colonial Parkway are devoid of any streetlights and are extremely isolated, making it a popular lover's lane frequented by young adults. In each incident, a young couple sitting in a vehicle was targeted, with both partners killed. 3 pairs of victims were recovered, and another couple remains missing and presumed dead. Several additional homicides have also been tentatively linked to the 4 confirmed cases. The causes of death included strangulation, gunshot, and stabbing. The killer or killers drove victims' vehicles away from the murder sites. The linking of the 4 crimes is circumstantial. In January 2024, authorities announced that at least 2 of the murders had been conclusively linked to an official suspect, Alan Wade Pokey Wilmer Sr., a local fisherman who had died in 2017. Wilmer was conclusively linked to 2 more murders in 2026 too. He was also linked through DNA evidence to the previously unrelated murder of Teresa Lynn Spoff Howell. Wilmer had been described as suspect number 1 in 2 of the canonical murders but was freed after passing a polygraph test. The victims and their backgrounds: 1. Rebecca Dowski and Kathy Thomas. The first known victims in the Colonial Parkway killings were Kathleen Marion Kathy Thomas, 27, a United States Naval Academy graduate, and college senior Rebecca Ann Becky Dowski, 21, a stockbroker. The lesbian couple disappeared after leaving a computer lab on the William and Mary campus at around 6:30 p.m. on October 9, 1986. On October 12, between 5:30 and 5:45 a.m., a jogger discovered a white 1980 Honda Civic at the bottom of an embankment at the Cheatham Annex overlook 7 miles east of Williamsburg. The Civic had veered off the road and into thick, dense shrubbery, only a few feet from a 15-foot drop into the York River. A patrolman called to the scene discovered Thomas and Dowski's bodies inside the vehicle. Dowski's body was found in the back seat, while Thomas was found stuffed into the hatchback. An autopsy found rope burns on both women's necks and wrists, as well as signs of strangulation. Their throats had been slashed so deeply that they were nearly decapitated. Thomas apparently struggled with her attacker, as a clump of hair was later found between her fingers. Both women were fully clothed, and there was no evidence of sexual assault. Authorities ruled out robbery as a motive, since both women's purses were in the vehicle, and no money or jewelry had been taken. The killer had covered the bodies in vehicle with diesel fuel but had not lit them on fire. Over 100 latent and full fingerprints were found on the interior and exterior of the Civic, but they matched no one in police records. At that time, police believed that the murders happened elsewhere, as little blood was found in the car itself. In November 1986, just weeks after the murder, news outlets reported that FBI profilers were constructing a profile of the person or persons responsible for the murders. In 2024, Bill Thomas recalled that for days after his sister Kathy's death, the FBI suggested to him that the perpetrator may have been a member of law enforcement. In 2026, authorities announced that DNA evidence had conclusively linked Alan Wilmer to the murders of Dowski and Thomas. 2. David Nobling and Robin Edwards in 1987. Salesman David Lee Nobling, 20, an 8th grade student, Robin Margaret Edwards, 14, were murdered. Edwards and Nobling disappeared on September 19th, after Nobling agreed to drive his younger cousin and Edwards on a date to a screening of the film. Nobling and Edwards left their homes both around midnight. On September 23rd, 2 days after Nobling's abandoned truck had been discovered, the bodies of Nobling and Edwards were found after being washed ashore with a tide about 100 feet apart on the bank of the James River. Both victims had been shot, Edwards in the back of the head execution style, and Nobling twice, once in the head and once in the shoulder. Both were partially clothed. Edwards was found with her jeans unfastened and her bra around her neck. Investigators were unsure if a sexual assault had taken place since, despite Edwards being underage, it was presumed that she and Nobling had a sexual relationship. The state police later said she was assaulted. Authorities suspected a connection between the double murder of Nobling and Edwards to that of Dowski and Thomas, although the former deaths did not occur on the Colonial Parkway. Both sets of victims were couples who had been killed at or around Lover's Lane areas, and the 2 locations were only about a 30-minute drive apart. 13. On January 8, 2024, authorities announced that DNA evidence had conclusively linked Alan Wilmer to the murders of Nobling and Edwards. Via DNA evidence, Wilmer was also linked to the otherwise unrelated 1989 murder of Teresa Lynn Howell. Brian Craig Pettinger, 25, a heavy equipment operator employed as a maintenance man for a local apartment complex. was last seen at a Hampton Ballroom dance studio on December 4, 1987. At 11:30 p.m., Pettinger was training to become a ballroom dance instructor. 2 days after reporting him missing, Pettinger's wife discovered his vehicle in the parking lot of the Newmarket North Mall, 16. 2 months later, on February 3, 1988, fishermen found Pettinger's body floating in a marshy area of the James River in Suffolk, near the mouth of Chuckatuck Creek. His wrists and ankles were tied, and a rope was bound around his neck. The lead investigator in the case believed that Pettinger had likely been hog-tied. The autopsy showed that Pettinger had suffered blunt force trauma to the back of his head. He was found to have been thrown alive into the river and drowned, unable to swim. The murder remains unsolved. Pettinger worked as a security guard and loss prevention officer for the same security services company as Edward's mother at the time of her murder. Suspect Wayne Elliott Mack, a fellow dance instructor, later acknowledged having left the studio with Pettinger. Mack died by suicide a few months later. Lori Ann Powell, Compton 18, a graduate of Gloucester High School in Gloucester County, disappeared on March 8, 1988, after an argument with her boyfriend, Chris Cutler. According to Cutler, Powell exited his vehicle during the argument and was last seen at approximately 11:30 p.m. walking along State Route 614 toward the U.S. Route 17 interchange in White Marsh. Cutler was originally considered a suspect in Powell's death. On April 2, 1988, Powell's body was recovered from the James River near Ragged Island. She was found nude and had sustained multiple stab wounds to her back. Powell had previously worked as a receptionist at the same security company that employed both Pettinger and the mother of Edwards. In November 2025, authorities publicly confirmed that Alan Wilmer was responsible for Powell's murder. On April 10, 1988, Christopher Newport College students Cassandra Lee, Haley 18, and Richard Keith Cole 20 were reported missing. Cole, who was on a 2-week break from his regular girlfriend, asked out Haley, a classmate, to see a movie on Saturday night and then attend a party. Cole picked up Haley at her family's residence in Grafton in his red 1982 Toyota Celica. The pair attended a party in the University Square area, where they were seen socializing separately. They were last seen leaving the party sometime between 11:30 p.m. and 2:25 a.m. Cole's unoccupied vehicle was found at the York River overlook in Yorktown on the day of their disappearance. Police dogs tracked the 2 students, sent along the Parkway, past the site of the Dowski-Thomas vehicle recovery, to the Indian Field Creek shoreline. But to this day, their bodies have never been found. Wilmer was polygraphed as a suspect but was released after passing. On July 1, 1989, Teresa Lynn Howell, 29, was seen leaving the Zodiac Club, a popular Hampton night spot, at around 2:30 a.m. 7 hours later. Her body was found by a construction worker in a nearby wooded area. Howell had been sexually assaulted and strangled. The murder was not connected to the Colonial Parkway killings until 2022, when DNA from the case was linked to the Nobling Edwards killing. The DNA was later identified as belonging to Wilmer. On September 5, 1989, Anna Maria Phelps, 18, and her boyfriend's brother, Daniel Lauer, 21, vanished en route to Virginia Beach. Lauer's vehicle, a gold 1972 Chevrolet Nova, was later found abandoned at the westbound Interstate 64 rest stop in New Kent County. It is unclear whether Phelps and Lauer were killed at the rest stop or elsewhere. The car appeared to have recently been driven through the woods. Phelps' purse was found inside the car, so robbery was again ruled out as a motive. On October 19th, the skeletonized bodies of Phelps and Lauer were discovered by hunters in a wooded area along Interstate 64 between Williamsburg and Richmond. They were near a logging road about a mile away from the rest stop where Lauer's car was found. In 2010, a note was discovered in a box recovered years earlier from Phelps' apartment. The note, which was undated and purportedly written by Phelps, indicated that she was to meet someone in a blue van at a rest stop. The note named an individual and provided a phone number. On August 21, 1984, the bodies of Michael Sturgis, Mike Margaret, 21, and Donna Lynn Hall, 18, were found in a wooded area, 300 yards southwest of the King's Crossing apartment complex in Enrico. The couple had been last seen on August 17th, when they had told their respective families they planned to go on a camping trip together. Both victims had been stabbed and their throats slit. Some detectives believe that Hall and Margaret were the first victims of the Colonial Parkway killer due to similarities in modus operandi. In 2024, after Wilmer was officially identified as a suspect, it was revealed that his older brother Keith had been a suspect in the 1985 murder of Mary Kaiser Harding, 24, whose body was found floating in the Rappahannock River. Keith's wife, Brenda Pittman Wilmer, worked at the same bank as Harding. Keith had been banned from the bank's premises after he had sexually harassed customers and employees, including Mary. Alan Wilmer's house and boat were searched by law enforcement at the time, but no evidence tying him to the crime was found. Allen also took a polygraph, but the results were again inconclusive. Another local fisherman, Emerson Stevens, was ultimately convicted and imprisoned for Harding's murder. Stevens was later found to have been wrongfully convicted and was released from prison after serving 32 years. He received a full pardon from Virginia Governor Ralph Northam in 2021. Keith Wilmer died on April 30, 2025, at age 73. If you like our content, make sure to subscribe for more and hit the like button. It goes a long way in helping us bring you more murder mysteries. The prime suspect in the murders, Alan Wade Wilmer Sr., worked as a fisherman on his own boat, the Denny Wade, primarily harvesting clams and oysters. He later started a tree-cutting company. Wilmer was an avid hunter, a member of a local hunting club, and won local archery competitions. He was married on February 22, 1975. He later divorced. Wilmer had 2 children, both adults at the time of his death in 2017. Wilmer was known to confront couples on the Colonial Parkway. In one instance, he had confronted a girl and a long-haired boyfriend, mistaking the pair for a same-sex couple. Wilmer also placed himself near the site of the recovered vehicle in the Haley Cole disappearance. Despite public protests, Wilmer's DNA was not entered into the CODIS, the United States National DNA Database. He showed a disturbing pattern of stalking or surveilling victims before attacking. The killer's MO suggested patience, planning, and a need for controlaphone, leaving the crime scenes untouched to avoid forensic evidence. The fact that he targeted couples in isolated settings indicates a possible obsession with domination, control, or a deep-seated hatred of love or intimacy. Recent developments and other suspects. In recent years, asides the known perpetrator Wilmer, renewed interest in the case was sparked by DNA evidence and a book titled The Murders of the Colonial Parkway by journalist and researcher David R. Huddle. Huddle proposed a compelling suspect, Earl Van Best Jr., a French-Canadian man living in California, who was identified through a genealogy website as a potential match to the DNA evidence collected from the crime scenes. Van Best had a criminal history that included a 1970s conviction for a sexual assault, and investigators uncovered a possible pattern of violent behavior. In 2018, DNA testing on evidence from the case was linked to a relative of Van Best, suggesting he might have been the killer. However, no conclusive proof directly connected him to the murders, and Van Best died in 2019, leaving his guilt unconfirmed. Other suspects and theories: 1. Multiple offenders. Larry McCann, head of the Virginia State Police's Behavioral Science Unit, argued that 2 individuals were working together in the murders. He felt the level of control demonstrated over victims suggested to perpetrators. Irvin Wells, of the FBI, also suspected a pair of offenders. In a 2025 episode of the Mind Over Murder podcast, Kathy Thomas' brother Bill stated, "I'm fairly certain that Wilmer did not act alone to Liberty Security Services." On April 19, 1988, press reports alleged that local private investigator Ronald Little, then under arrest on immigration charges, was a suspect in the murders. Robin Edwards' mother Bonnie had been employed by Little's company, Liberty Security Services, while Brian Pettinger had worked for the firm as a security guard and loss prevention officer. Lori Ann Powell Compton, who had gone missing on March 8, 1988, was also an employee of the company. The FBI denied that Little was a suspect in the murders. Little was ultimately deported back to his native New Zealand in 1989 and has since died. In 2025, Bill Thomas opined, "Here just seems to be this recurring nexus around this small security company based in Gloucester, just a couple of miles away from where Lori Ann Powell was last seen." Most of the couples involved in the Colonial Parkway murders have been proven to have been the victims of Wilmer, but the inability to link the other victims to Wilmer would suggest that there may well have been a copycat murderer. Wilmer died in 2017 before the DNA evidence that would have surely put him behind bars for life was linked to him. Wilmer died at his home in Lancaster County, Virginia. He was 63 years old. If you liked our content, please subscribe and hit the like button. It goes a long way in supporting more content in the future.